The wedding was supposed to begin in 12 minutes. Snow fell in lazy, expensive flakes outside the glass walls of the St. Celeste Regency Hotel, the kind of snow that looked cinematic instead of cold. Inside the grand ballroom, white roses climbed the pillars like a warning. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the crowd. Politicians, bankers, celebrities, people who smiled with their teeth and measured love in contracts. At the center of it all stood Jae-min Kang, 34 years old, billionaire, the heir everyone feared to mention out loud because his family name wasn't just money, it was power with sharp edges. The Kang Group owned tech, shipping, real estate, and rumors, the kind that never made it into newspapers. In his hand, Jae-min held a rosary, dark beads worn smooth, a small silver cross dulled by years of touch. It had belonged to his mother, the last thing she'd held before she died, the last thing she'd begged him with, whispering through tears, "Don't become your father." Across the velvet rope, near the service entrance, a young woman in a blue hotel cleaning uniform stood frozen. Her name was Nia Adeyemi, 27, an immigrant with tired eyes and careful hands, the kind of woman the rich never looked at long enough to remember. In less than 5 minutes, security would accuse her of stealing. In less than 10 minutes, a man with a stiff suit and a smile too polite would mention immigration. And in exactly 12 minutes, Jae-min Kang would stop his Christmas wedding in front of everyone, because the woman they were about to crush was the same woman who had returned his mother's rosary when no one else would. Nia's fingers curled around the edge of her mop cart like it could keep her standing. She could already feel the eyes, the whispers, the way the room leaned toward scandal, the way starving people lean toward bread. She didn't belong in this ballroom. She hadn't even wanted to cross the threshold. But the rosary, she had recognized it instantly when she found it under a sofa in the bridal suite hallway, half hidden like it was ashamed of being lost. She'd picked it up with reverence, not because she knew whose it was, but because she knew what it meant to lose the last piece of someone you loved. Now, she was here, about to be punished for doing the right thing. And Jae-min, still at the altar, still surrounded by white roses and expensive air, watched the scene unfolding near the service door with a face so calm it looked carved. But his grip tightened on the beads until his knuckles went pale. The officiant cleared his throat nervously. Someone laughed too loudly. A woman in diamonds fanned herself like she was watching theater. Jae-min lifted his gaze, past the front row, past the cameras, past the family members who expected obedience, and held it steady on Nia. Not the uniform, not the mop cart. Her face. He saw the same expression he'd seen in boardrooms, in men who knew they were about to lose everything. That panic that made the soul feel cornered. Except Nia wasn't trying to win anything. She was just trying to survive. And suddenly, the ballroom felt too small for the lie they were about to call love. Jae-min took one step back from the altar. The movement was small, but it landed like thunder. His fiancée, perfect hair, perfect smile, turned sharply. Her eyes widened in shock, then hardened as if she could will him back into place. Jae-min didn't look at her. He looked at Nia. Then he raised the rosary slightly, as if it weighed more than the ring waiting on the velvet pillow, and his voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled, and lethal in its clarity. "Stop." The music stumbled. The room stilled. "Cancel the ceremony," he said. A gasp rippled through the ballroom like a knife sliding under silk. Someone whispered his name like it was prayer. Someone else whispered it like it was a threat. And Nia, still frozen by the service entrance, felt the world tilt violently on its axis, because she didn't know what was happening. She didn't know why the most powerful man in the room was looking at her as if she mattered. And she definitely didn't know that 48 hours earlier, she had fallen asleep in his bed. and he had let her. 2 days earlier, Christmas didn't feel like Christmas at the St. Celeste Regency. Christmas for the guests was champagne and carols played by a string quartet in the lobby. A 12-foot tree decorated with ornaments that probably cost more than Nia's rent. Gingerbread houses behind glass displays. White lights draped over everything until even the elevators looked holy. For the staff, Christmas felt like overtime. It felt like aching feet. Fluorescent lights. Rubber gloves that smelled faintly of bleach no matter how many times you washed your hands. It felt like being invisible, while the world above you glittered. Nia pushed her cart down the hallway on the 41st floor, the quiet part of the hotel reserved for private penthouses and silent money. The carpet swallowed her footsteps. The walls held artwork that looked like it belonged in museums instead of corridors. She had been on shift since 7 in the morning. It was now past 10 at night. She had promised herself she would leave on time today. She had promised her little brother, Toby, she would call him before he went to sleep back in Lagos. He was 14, bright, stubborn, and always trying to sound older than he was. But promises didn't pay school fees, and her mother's medicine didn't care about time zones. Nia paused outside Suite 4101, the royal penthouse, the crown jewel. The suite that came with a private elevator and a city view so wide it looked like you could own the sky. The name on the VIP list made every staff member straighten their posture. Mr. Kang Jae-min. People called him a tech billionaire in the press. In the quieter corners of the hotel, people called him something else. The Kang heir. The man who could end careers with a phone call and end lives with silence. Nobody said the second part too loud, because even rumors had consequences. Nia swallowed, adjusted her badge, and used her master key. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, the penthouse smelled like cedar and cold air, like someone had brought winter indoors on purpose. A tall Christmas tree stood near the window. Real, not plastic, its lights glowing softly. The ornaments were elegant and minimal. Silver, white, deep green. No childish joy, no messy tinsel, just perfection. And the rest of the place looked like perfection had hosted a party and left without cleaning up. Crystal glasses sat on the marble counter, each with a sip of amber liquid still clinging to the bottom. A plate of expensive food had been abandoned near the sofa. Tiny portions, artfully arranged, now cold and untouched. The fireplace had been used, but not enjoyed. Ash sat neat and gray, like a thought that had burned out. Nia moved with quiet efficiency. She collected the glasses first, balancing them on a tray with hands that had learned steadiness through necessity. She wiped down the counters, the cloth moving in slow circles. She vacuumed the thick white carpet, the machine's low hum filling the massive space. Her back began to ache, sharp, insistent, familiar. She ignored it. She always ignored it. In her mind, she saw her mother's face on the video calls, tired eyes, brave smile. She heard Toby's voice saying, "I got the top score in English, Nia. Can you believe it?" She pictured the transfer receipts, the numbers that never felt like enough. When she finally stepped into the bedroom, she stopped. The bed didn't look real. It was enormous, dressed in white linen so smooth it looked untouched by human life. Pillows stacked like clouds. A dark wood headboard polished to a mirror-like sheen. A throw blanket folded at the foot. Cashmere, if Nia had to guess. Everything in the room whispered, "Rest is allowed here." Nia stood there for a moment longer than she should have. She thought about her own mattress, thin, noisy, shared in a small apartment with 2 other women. She thought about the neighbor upstairs who always played music too loud. She thought about the way sleep came for her in short, broken pieces. And she felt something inside her, something fragile, reach toward the softness like a starving hand. The clock on the wall read 10:13 p.m. Her shift ended at 9. Just 5 minutes, she told herself. 5 minutes to let my back stop screaming. She sat carefully on the edge of the bed as if it might accuse her of contamination. The mattress gave beneath her, cradling her weight with shocking gentleness. Nia exhaled. She leaned back only a little, just enough to ease her spine. And the room, warm, silent, smelling faintly of pine and expensive laundry detergent, wrapped around her like a lullaby. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then the second became a minute. The minute became an hour. Nia fell asleep in the billionaire's bed, still in her blue uniform, one hand curled against the sheet as if she was afraid the softness might vanish if she didn't hold on. Hours later, the penthouse door opened again. Jaemin Kang stepped inside without turning on the lights. He moved the way men moved when they were used to being watched. Controlled, quiet, alert. His suit jacket hung over one arm, his tie was loosened. His face looked carved from patience that had been forced into him. The day had been an endless procession of meetings, holiday charity appearances, family obligations disguised as generosity, cameras, smiles, the constant pressure of his father's expectations pressing down like a hand on the back of his neck. All he wanted was silence, a shower, sleep. He walked through the living area and registered with distant approval that the mess was gone. Good. The staff had done their job. Then he pushed open the bedroom door. And stopped. There was a woman in his bed. For a split second, rage surged. Hot and immediate. His home. His private space. His rules. How did anyone get in here? Then his eyes adjusted to the dim light from the city outside, and he saw the uniform. Not silk. Not a scandal. Not a stranger dressed to seduce. A hotel cleaner. Small. Curled on her side like someone who hadn't felt safe enough to sleep deeply in years. Jaemin took one slow step forward. He expected to see greed in her face. Entitlement. Some kind of scheme. Instead, her expression was peaceful. Not pretty perfect. Tired. A faint shadow under her eyes. Lips parted slightly as she breathed. One hand tucked under her cheek, the other resting on the duvet with the limp surrender of someone whose body had finally stopped fighting. She looked like she had lost a war, and sleep was the only surrender left. Jaemin's anger faltered. Then it melted into something he didn't recognize at first. Protectiveness. He glanced at the corner near the bedroom door. Her cart stood neatly parked, cleaning supplies arranged with precision. A small worn handbag sat on top. Not designer, not flashy, practical. He understood. She hadn't chosen his bed because she wanted him. She had chosen it because her body had simply given up. Jaemin stood there longer than he should have. He had lived his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. People who played roles. People who performed love and loyalty and fear. This woman wasn't performing anything. She was just human. He should have woken her, called security, protected the image, protected the rules. But the idea felt cruel, like kicking a wounded animal just to prove you could. Jaemin turned away quietly. He closed the door almost all the way, leaving it cracked open, and walked back into the living area. He lay down on the sofa, expensive, wide, built for aesthetics more than comfort, and stared at the ceiling. The billionaire slept on his own couch so a cleaner could sleep in his bed. And the strangest part was, listening to the faint sound of her breathing behind the half-closed door, he didn't feel invaded. For the first time in weeks, in his cold, perfect penthouse lit by Christmas lights that didn't mean anything, he didn't feel entirely alone. Morning arrived gently. A pale stripe of sunlight slid across the floor. The city outside looked like it had been dusted with sugar. Jaemin woke with a stiff neck and the faint annoyance of a man who wasn't used to discomfort. For a moment, he didn't remember why he was on the sofa. Then he remembered her. Curiosity flickered like a match. He sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and listened. The bedroom was silent. A colder part of him, trained by years of suspicion, wondered if she had stolen something and left. But a warmer part of him, louder than it should have been, hoped she was still there. Inside the bedroom, Nia surfaced from the deepest sleep she'd had in years. She stretched, slow, luxurious, the kind of stretch her body forgot it could do. The sunlight warmed her face. For one blissful second, she thought she was dreaming. Then reality slammed into her. White linen, massive bed, penthouse ceiling, Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner of the living area beyond the door. She sat up so fast the duvet slid off her shoulder. Oh no. Her heart began to hammer. Her hands shook as she looked down at her uniform, wrinkled, real, proof of her mistake. She had fallen asleep on the job. In a guest's bed. In Mr. Kang Jaemin's bed. Nia scrambled out of the bed, smoothing the sheets frantically as if she could erase the evidence with panic. What time was it? How late was she? Would she be fired? Would they report her? Would this ruin everything? Her mother's medicine, Toby's school fees, the rent, the whole fragile structure of her life. She tiptoed toward the door, praying, stupidly, that he hadn't come back last night. Then she saw him through the crack. Jaemin stood by the window, phone in hand, speaking in Korean in a low, controlled voice. He ended the call and turned slightly, as if he already knew she was there. Nia's stomach dropped. There was no escape. She forced herself to inhale, straightened her uniform, lifted her chin with whatever dignity she could find. Then she opened the door and stepped into the living room. Jaemin looked at her fully now. In the morning light, she seemed even younger than he'd thought. And the fear in her eyes hit him like something physical. He had seen fear before, on men who were about to lose companies, lose reputations, lose power. This was different. This was survival fear. "Good morning," Jaemin said, voice calm, softer than he intended. The sound of his voice broke something in Nia. Words spilled out in a rush. "Mr. Kang, sir. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, I swear. I was cleaning and my back... I just sat down for a minute, just 1 minute, and then Her throat tightened. "Please don't tell the manager. Please. I need this job. My family..." Her voice cracked. She looked down at the floor, waiting for the punishment to fall like an axe. Jaemin watched her for a long moment, taking in the raw honesty. No excuses, no flirting, no entitlement, just terror. "It's all right," he said gently. Nia's head snapped up. Confusion and disbelief warred on her face. "It's all right?" she repeated as if the words didn't make sense. "Yes," Jaemin said, and he meant it. "You looked very tired. I decided you needed the bed more than I did." The kindness, simple, unexpected, hit Nia harder than anger would have. She blinked fast, fighting tears she didn't want to show him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much, sir." "Call me Jaemin," he said. He moved to the kitchen island, putting the marble between them instinctively, giving her space without making it obvious. He set 2 cups down with the ease of someone who had been served all his life, but wasn't helpless. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nia," she said, voice steadier now. "Nia Adeyemi." He repeated it quietly. "Nia." The way he said her name, like it mattered, sent a strange shiver down her spine. It wasn't how managers said it. It wasn't how guests said it. It wasn't even how most people said it. It was careful. "You want tea?" he asked. "You must be thirsty." Before she could refuse, he was already filling the kettle. Nia stood there, stunned, watching the billionaire make tea as if this wasn't absurd. The kettle clicked on. Steam rose. The scent of jasmine filled the air, soft, warm, almost intimate. "My family," Jaemin said, not looking directly at her, offering an easy bridge back to her earlier plea. You send money home? Nia hesitated, then nodded. Yes. My mother. And my younger brother. He's in school. I send what I can. Jamin poured the water into the cups, the sound gentle in the quiet penthouse. It's heavy, he said, carrying people on your shoulders. Nia looked at him sharply, because that sentence didn't sound like polite conversation. It sounded like someone who knew. Jamin slid a cup toward her. Their fingers didn't touch, but the air between them felt charged anyway. Nia wrapped her hands around the warm porcelain as if she could borrow strength from it. I'm sorry, she said again, softer now. I don't usually do something like this. I know, Jamin said. If you did, you wouldn't have been afraid. He said it like it was obvious. And something inside Nia, something that had been clenched tight for years, loosened by one small notch. They talked for a few minutes, strangely normal. She told him she was from Nigeria. He asked about Lagos with genuine curiosity, not the bored politeness she was used to. She told him about the heat, the markets, the noise that made even silence feel alive. He told her about Seoul winters, about mountains, about his mother's love of Christmas music even though she didn't celebrate it the way America did. For a moment, the penthouse wasn't rich and poor, boss and cleaner, power and survival. It was two tired people sharing tea while the city woke up below them. But reality waited, impatient as always. Nia glanced toward the door. I should go. I'm already late. Jamin nodded. No one will know about this. She blinked. You won't tell? I won't, he said simply. Nia's throat tightened again. She set the cup down carefully as if it might shatter if she moved too fast. Thank you, she said. Jamin? He gave a small nod, almost shy. Be well, Nia. She pushed her cart out into the hallway and rode the service elevator down with a heart that couldn't decide whether to tremble or sing, because she had a secret now. A dangerous, impossible kind of secret. And upstairs, in the penthouse, Jae-min Kang stood alone with the faint scent of jasmine still in the air. He stared at the door she had left through. Then he picked up his phone. Not to call his father, not to call his board, not to call a politician. He called hotel security. I need information, he said quietly. About one of your staff. Nia Adeyemi. A pause. No, he added, voice sharpening. She's not in trouble. Another pause. It's personal, he finished. And when he ended the call, a slow, private smile touched his mouth. Small, genuine, unfamiliar. Because for the first time in a long time, Christmas didn't feel like a performance. It felt like something unexpected had entered his life through a crack in the rules, and he intended to follow it. Downstairs in the staff locker room, Nia changed into a fresh uniform with hands that still shook. Janice, her co-worker, older, sharp-eyed, protective, looked her up and down. Girl, you look like you saw a ghost. Nia forced a laugh that didn't sound real. Just tired. Janice narrowed her eyes. Tired doesn't make you smile like that. Nia's smile faded. Because that was the thing. She wasn't sure she was smiling. She wasn't sure what she was doing. All she knew was that the billionaire with the cold reputation had slept on his own couch so she could sleep in his bed. And that kind of kindness could ruin a woman faster than cruelty, because it made you start hoping. Outside, the hotel played carols for guests who didn't notice the staff carrying the season on their backs. Inside, Jamin studied Nia's schedule like it was a blueprint. Not like a predator. Like a strategist who had finally found something worth risking the rules for. And 2 days later, that strategy would lead him to a Christmas wedding he no longer wanted. And to Nia, standing by the service door, about to be destroyed for returning a rosary. The first thread had already been tied. Neither of them understood yet how tight it would pull. Part 2-4. Jae-min Kang did not sleep well after that morning. He kept seeing her exactly as she had been in his bed, curled small in the center of something too soft, dressed in a blue uniform that smelled faintly of bleach, breathing like someone who had finally stopped fighting for a few hours. It should have annoyed him. It should have been a violation. Instead, it haunted him in a way that felt almost gentle. By noon, he had the information, not from a stalker's instinct but from a strategist's precision. Nia Adeyemi. Housekeeping. Night and split shifts. Breaks at the staff cafeteria on level B. Locker room by the service stairs. Route between supply closet and West Wing suites. He stared at the schedule on his phone the way he stared at market reports. Only this time, the numbers didn't represent profit. They represented chances. Small windows of time where he could speak to her like a person without turning her life into a headline. He could have summoned her to the penthouse. One phone call. One order. A man like him could bend the hotel to his will without lifting a finger. But he knew what that would do. It would make her feel trapped. It would turn kindness into debt. It would remind her of the distance between them like a slap. He didn't want her to owe him anything. That thought was new, unsettling. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He planned to meet her by accident. On Thursday, he changed into dark trousers and a plain cashmere sweater, the kind of clothing that looked expensive only if you knew what you were looking at. He left his private elevator and walked the service corridor like someone who belonged there. The staff cafeteria door opened with a soft squeak, and the room inside was a different world. Warm air. Real food. The low, steady murmur of conversations in many languages. Plastic trays. Fluorescent lights that didn't flatter anyone. People looked up when he entered, then looked away fast as if seeing him was dangerous. He stood still for one heartbeat, letting his eyes adjust. Then he saw her. Nia sat alone at a small table near the corner, a simple sandwich beside her, a paperback book open in front of her. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, her face tired in a way that wasn't just physical. But there was something calm in her too, like she carried her own quiet country inside her chest. Jaemin's throat tightened inexplicably. He walked over, the sound of his shoes too loud on the cafeteria floor. "Nia," he said gently. Her head lifted. The expression that crossed her face happened in layers. Confusion at hearing her name, shock as she recognized him, then a flash of panic, like fear had become a reflex. And then, slowly, something warmer flickered behind her eyes, cautious as a flame in wind. "Mr. Kang," she said, already trying to rise. "Please," he said quickly. "Don't stand." He gestured to the chair opposite her. "May I?" he asked like it mattered. That alone threw her off balance more than his wealth ever could. "Yes," she said softly. "Of course." He sat on the plastic chair like it was a throne he didn't deserve. Around them, the cafeteria went quieter, then resumed in an uneasy rhythm. Nia glanced at her sandwich as if it might embarrass her. "You should eat," Jaemin said, reading her discomfort. "Please don't stop because I'm here." She hesitated, then took a small bite. Her hands were neat. Careful. The kind of hands that didn't waste motion because life had never given her space to be careless. "What are you reading?" he asked. Her face changed instantly. Not brighter in a childish way, but alive, like someone had opened a window in a closed room. She tilted the book so he could see the cover. "Things Fall Apart," she said. It's for my brother." "Your brother?" Jaemin asked. "He's studying it," she explained. "Back home. He calls me and asks questions. I read the chapters again so I can talk to him, like I'm there." Jaemin stared at her. He was used to conversations about mergers and leverage and loyalty. He was used to people praising his intelligence just to stay close to his power. This woman was reading a novel on her break because her brother needed her, and she wanted him to feel less alone. "What is it about?" he asked, genuinely. Nia began to tell him. Her voice was quiet at first, then steadier. She spoke about a proud man who feared weakness, about a village being pulled apart by forces it didn't understand, about the way pride could become a weapon turned inward. She didn't use fancy words. She didn't try to impress him. She just cared. And Jaemin found himself listening like he hadn't listened in years. He asked questions. Not to test her, but because he wanted her answers. She asked him about Korea, about food, family, winter traditions, not his company, not his net worth. When he told her his mother used to hum Christmas songs even though she didn't celebrate the holiday the way Americans did, Nia smiled faintly. "My mother," she said, "used to sing hymns when there was no electricity. She said the darkness hated music." Something inside Jaemin moved. A memory. A wound. A softness he kept buried under control. He realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. The break ended too quickly. When Nia glanced at the clock, her eyes widened in alarm. "I have to go." Jaemin stood with her. "Of course, I didn't mean to keep you." "You didn't," she said fast. And then, as if surprised by her own honesty, she added, "It was nice." He held her gaze. It was. She turned to hurry away, then paused, as if something pulled her back. "Mr. Kang," she said carefully, "please, please don't do this if it will cause trouble." Jaemin's jaw tightened. "I won't let anyone trouble you." The words were instinctive, powerful, dangerous. Nia's eyes flicked down, then up again, and her voice sharpened just slightly. "I don't want protection that feels like control." The sentence landed between them like a line drawn in chalk. Jaemin looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "You're right," he said. "Thank you for saying that." He stepped back, giving her space, giving her dignity. "Have a good shift, Nia." She left, pushing through the staff doorway, disappearing into the corridors where people like him rarely walked. Jaemin remained standing by the cafeteria table, feeling something he didn't have a name for: purpose. Their next meetings were not planned on paper, but they were planned in the way the heart plans things, by orbiting. Jaemin adjusted his schedule. He canceled meetings he didn't need. He delayed calls that could wait. He found himself in the hotel at odd hours, walking corridors that smelled like soap instead of perfume. He never summoned her. He never ordered her. He waited for moments where he could ask instead of take. One afternoon, he found her near the lobby Christmas tree, kneeling to help an elderly guest who had dropped her cane. The woman's hands trembled, her face flushed with embarrassment. "It's all right," Nia told her gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." She lifted the cane, then offered her arm without making the woman feel weak. Jaemin watched from a short distance. The elderly guest, Mrs. Hargrove, he later learned, patted Nia's hand like she was blessing her. "You're a good girl," Mrs. Hargrove said, voice thin but sincere. "People rush past me like I'm furniture." "You didn't." Nia smiled, small and warm. "My father says older people are the memory of the world. If we ignore you, we forget who we are." Jaemin stood frozen. His mother would have said something like that. That night, he carried the rosary in his pocket, rubbing the beads with his thumb until the skin grew tender. The closer they grew, the more careful Nia became. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't hint at needs the way desperate people sometimes did when they smelled opportunity. But she didn't pretend she was fearless either. One evening, as they stood near the service elevators, the lobby carols floating faintly through the air, she asked him, voice low, "Why are you talking to me?" The question wasn't accusatory, it was protective. Jaemin didn't answer right away. He looked at her the way he looked at a storm on the horizon, beautiful, dangerous, inevitable. "Because you returned something that mattered," he said finally. Nia tilted her head. "People return lost things every day." "Not everyone," he said, and something darker flashed behind his eyes. "Not in my world." Nia studied him for a moment. Then she nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she wanted to. "If your world is dangerous," she said quietly, "then don't bring me into it." Jamin felt the urge to argue, to promise, to declare certainty like he always did. Instead, he said the only honest thing. "I'm trying not to." The first time they left the hotel together, it was because Nia allowed it. He suggested a short walk during her break, outside, where the air smelled like snow and roasted chestnuts from street vendors. A small Christmas market had formed on the plaza across from the hotel, lights strung between stalls like constellations. Nia hesitated. Then she agreed. They walked side by side, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. She stopped at a stall selling hot cocoa, reached for her wallet, and Jamin instinctively moved to pay. "No," Nia said firmly. He paused. "I can—" "No," she repeated, softer this time but unmovable. "If we do this, we do it as equals." Jamin stared at her as if she had spoken an ancient law. Then he stepped back. "All right," he said. "Tell me what I owe." Nia blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly. "Half." He handed over the money without protest. It shouldn't have mattered. But to Nia, it mattered so much she felt her chest tighten with relief. They stood under the lights, steaming cups in their hands, watching snow drift down over the plaza. People laughed around them. Couples kissed beneath mistletoe hung over stall entrances. Nia's cheeks were flushed from the cold. Jamin's gaze dropped to her mouth, then lifted quickly, controlled as ever. A mistletoe hung above them, swaying slightly in the wind. Nia followed his gaze, then looked back at him, her breath visible in the air between them. For a long moment, neither moved. Jamin's voice came out rougher than he intended. "May I?" he asked. The question was almost inaudible. Nia's heart slammed against her ribs. She could have said no. She should have said no. The world was full of women who regretted trusting powerful men. But he hadn't reached for her. He hadn't assumed. He hadn't taken. He had asked. Nia's eyes softened. She nodded once. Jamin leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. Their lips brushed, barely, soft as falling snow. The kiss lasted only a second. Then Jamin pulled back as if he feared himself. Nia stared at him, breathless, stunned by the gentleness. "Why did you stop?" she whispered. Jamin's eyes were dark, honest, strained. "Because I don't know what I'm capable of when I want something," he said. "And I don't want to hurt you." Nia's throat tightened. "You didn't," she whispered. "Not yet." Trouble arrived wearing perfume. Seo Yeren entered the hotel like she owned it. She was beautiful in the way newspapers loved. Sharp cheekbones, flawless makeup, eyes that looked like they had never cried in public. Her coat was white, fur-trimmed, the kind of expensive that pretended it was effortless. Her engagement ring glittered as she walked through the lobby, greeting managers and staff as if she were already the queen of the building. Nia saw her from behind a pillar and felt something cold slide down her spine. This was not a woman who lost. Yaren's gaze swept the lobby, landing on Jamin near the elevator bank. She smiled and walked to him, linking her arm through his with practiced intimacy. Jamin's body stiffened. He kissed Yaren's cheek like a man fulfilling an obligation. Nia lowered her eyes and pushed her cart away, praying she hadn't been seen. But Yaren's eyes were trained for threats, not comfort. That night, she questioned the staff with sweet politeness. "Mr. Kang seems distracted," she said to a manager. "Is everything all right?" The manager laughed nervously. He's busy, miss. Wedding preparations. Yaren's smile remained, but her eyes sharpened. Of course. She didn't believe him. She began to watch. Chairman Kang Dae-hyun arrived the next morning. 61. Tall, silver-haired, face carved from winter. He walked through the hotel with the calm of a man who had never been told no and had never needed to raise his voice to destroy someone. Jaemin met him in a private lounge. The air between them was brittle. I hear you've been wandering, the chairman said softly. Jaemin's expression didn't change. I'm staying at the hotel. The chairman's gaze was ice. Don't insult me. I mean wandering into staff areas, cafeterias, service corridors, places a Kang does not belong. Jaemin's jaw tightened. You've been monitoring me. The chairman smiled faintly. Of course. You're my son. The words were poison dressed as affection. I also hear, the chairman continued, voice smooth, that a certain employee has attracted your attention. Jaemin didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. The chairman leaned forward slightly. This wedding will happen. Our alliance depends on it. If you humiliate the Seo family, you humiliate us. Jaemin's voice came out low. I'm not property. The chairman's eyes darkened. No. You are an heir. There is a difference. Then, casually, like mentioning the weather, he added, and the employee, Nia Adeyemi. Immigration paperwork is delicate for people like her. One phone call can make it complicated. Jaemin's blood turned to ice. You won't touch her, he said, each word controlled. The chairman's smile widened slightly. Then behave. That afternoon, Jaemin searched for Nia in the corridors. Panic coiled tight beneath his calm. He found her near a supply closet, refilling her cart. She looked up, and her face softened automatically. Then she saw his expression. What's wrong? She asked. Jaemin's mouth opened. He wanted to tell her the truth, to warn her, to pull her out of the hotel and out of his orbit and into safety. But safety with him was never simple, and fear made him cruel in the way trapped men sometimes became. He heard his father's voice in his head. One phone call. Complicated paperwork. He saw Nia's face on a deportation notice. And the only thought that broke through his panic was this. If she hates me, she'll run. If she runs, she'll live. So he did the worst thing. He hardened his eyes. You should stop meeting me, he said sharply. Nia blinked as if slapped. What? This is a mistake, Jaemin continued, voice cold. You don't understand what you're doing. Nia's throat tightened. I didn't ask for... You didn't ask for what? He cut in. For a billionaire to notice you? For a way out? For someone to fix your problems? The words were vile, and the moment they left his mouth he hated himself. Nia's face went still. Not angry, not dramatic. Just wounded in a way that made her look suddenly much older. You think I'm using you? She said quietly. Jaemin's hands clenched. He forced himself to keep his face hard. I think you should remember your place. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Nia stared at him for a long moment, and something in her eyes changed, like a door closing gently but forever. My place, she repeated softly. Then she nodded once. Thank you, she said, voice calm in the way people become calm when they are bleeding inside. Now I understand yours. She turned away and pushed her cart down the hallway without looking back. Jaemin stood frozen, fighting the urge to call her name. He didn't, because he could still hear his father's threat like a knife against her throat. That evening, Yaren made her move. She knew Jaemin had pulled away from something. She didn't know exactly what. But she didn't need the whole story to destroy the ending she didn't want. During a private fitting for her wedding jewelry, she removed a diamond bracelet and lost it. There were witnesses. There were whispers. There was the careful, practiced panic of a wealthy woman who knew how to perform victimhood. Security was called, management was called, and HR was called. An hour later, Nia was wiping fingerprints off the elevator glass when Mateo, the head of security, approached her with a face that looked strained. "Nia," he said quietly, "I need you to come with me." Her stomach dropped. "What happened?" she asked. Mateo didn't answer directly. "Just come." Nia followed him down a corridor she had never walked in daylight. The walls grew more expensive, the carpet thicker, the air colder. Outside the HR office, two men waited in dark suits. Not hotel staff. One held a folder, the other held a badge. Nia recognized the look immediately. Government. The man with the folder smiled politely. "Ms. Adeyemi, we need to ask you a few questions regarding a theft accusation." Nia's mouth went dry. "A theft accusation?" The second man glanced at her uniform with quiet contempt. "It's in your best interest to cooperate. Immigration status can be affected by criminal allegations." Nia's knees went weak. Mateo's hand hovered near her elbow, not touching, just ready in case she fell. Inside the office, a manager sat stiffly behind a desk, and beside him, perfect makeup, white coat, diamond ring, stood Seo Yerin. Yerin looked at Nia and smiled like a knife. Nia's heart hammered. She understood in that instant that this had never been about a bracelet. This was about power. And she had just been pulled into a war she hadn't agreed to fight. Outside the glass walls of the hotel, snow kept falling, innocent and quiet. Inside, Nia Adeyemi stared at the woman who was about to ruin her life, and realized the wedding was only 2 days away. The HR office smelled like printer ink and fear. Nia sat with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached, staring at the glossy desk that separated her from the people deciding whether she got to keep her life. The hotel manager kept adjusting his tie as if it were strangling him. Two men in dark suits stood near the door, one with a folder, one with a badge that didn't belong to the hotel. Mateo, the head of security, stayed close to Nia's chair, not touching her, but steady as a wall. Seo Yerin stood beside the manager in a white coat with fur trim, as flawless as a magazine cover, and twice as cold. Her mouth formed a sympathetic pout that never reached her eyes. "I don't understand how this could happen," Yerin said softly. "It's Christmas week. My wedding is here. My bracelet was right there, and then it wasn't." Nia's throat tightened. "I didn't take anything." The manager cleared his throat. "Ms. Adeyemi, we're required to investigate. Ms. Seo's diamond bracelet was reported missing during her fitting. You were assigned to that corridor." "I clean that corridor every day," Nia said, voice steady. "That doesn't make me a thief." The badge holder stepped forward, polite in the way threats often are. "Ms. Adeyemi, this is serious. Cooperation matters. Allegations can impact my immigration status," Nia finished, the words tasting like metal. "Yes, I heard you the first time." Yerin's eyes flickered with satisfaction, then softened again. "No one wants to be harsh," she murmured, "but the bracelet is sentimental." Sentimental, like a rosary, like a mother's last gift. Nia almost laughed at the audacity. The manager opened the folder and slid out printed stills. A housekeeping cart near the bridal suite corridor, a blue uniform passing a corner, timestamps that looked official enough to scare someone who didn't know how easily fear could be edited. Mateo leaned in slightly. "These images prove presence, not theft," he said. "Do you have footage of an actual taking? Do you have the bracelet recovered? A witness?" The manager avoided his eyes. The badge holder shifted his weight, impatient. Yerin lifted one manicured hand to her chest. "Mateo, don't make this difficult. I'm only asking for accountability." Nia stared at her. Accountability from the person who did nothing wrong? Yaren's smile tightened like a ribbon pulled too hard. I'm asking for the truth. A knock cut through the room. The door opened, and the temperature seemed to drop. Kang Jae-min stepped inside with the quiet certainty of a man who could bend a building by standing in it. He wore a dark coat, no tie, his hair slightly disordered. His face was calm, too calm. But his eyes moved straight to Nia as if the room's furniture didn't exist. Nia's heart hit her ribs like a fist. She hated that her body still reacted to him. Hated that part of her wanted relief, wanted rescue. Hated even more that she remembered the cruelty he'd used to push her away. Jaemin looked at the printed stills, then at Yaren, then at the badge holder. Explain, he said. They did. Quickly, eagerly, as if their words became more legitimate once he was there. Yaren performed heartbreak. The manager performed responsibility. The badge holder performed authority. Jaemin listened without interrupting. When they finished, silence filled the room. He turned to Nia. Did you take it? Nia met his gaze without blinking. No. His jaw flexed once. And the rosary? The question wasn't about the bracelet. She understood that. It was about who she was when no one was rewarding her. I returned it, Nia said. Jaemin inhaled slowly, then looked at Mateo. Get the full corridor footage, he said. From the server. Not printed stills. Not clipped segments. Full. The manager stammered. Mr. Kang, the system. Now, Jaemin repeated, voice quiet but immovable. Mateo nodded and left. The badge holder watched him go with a frown. Yaren stepped closer to Jaemin, her voice dropping into an intimate whisper meant for ownership. Jaemin, darling. We're days from the wedding. Do you want this to become a scandal? Jaemin didn't soften. Do you? Yaren's eyes widened. For the first time, her mask slipped. The badge holder cleared his throat. Mr. Kang, we have protocols. If an employee is suspected... You are not threatening her, Jaemin said, turning his gaze on the man like a blade. Not in this room. It's not a threat, the man replied stiffly. It's a fact. Then here's a fact, Jaemin said. Harass her without evidence, and you'll be answering to attorneys who don't celebrate Christmas. Nia's breath trembled on the exhale. It wasn't gratitude yet. It was shock. Because the man who had told her to remember her place was now telling everyone else to stop trying to erase it. Mateo returned with a tablet. His face was hard, controlled, like he'd seen enough injustice to despise it. I pulled the raw file, he said. The manager started to protest. We should review privately. No, Jaemin said. Play it. The video began with ordinary hallway nothingness. Then Yaren appeared on screen near her fitting suite, glancing around as if checking for witnesses. In her hand was the diamond bracelet, glittering, unmistakable. Nia's stomach dropped. Yaren on the video placed the bracelet into a linen bin in a service alcove, adjusted it neatly, then walked away, smoothing her coat like she'd done a good deed. The room went silent in the way a body goes silent when it realizes it's been stabbed. The manager's face drained. The badge holder's mouth opened, then closed. Yaren stood frozen, her lips parting as if she could deny what everyone had just watched with their own eyes. Jaemin didn't raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. You framed her, he said. Yaren's eyes flashed with rage and panic. Jaemin, I did it because you were afraid, he said. Afraid that someone with nothing could matter to me. Yaren swallowed hard. I'm your fiancé. I'm protecting what we... You were protecting your position, Jaemin corrected. Calm as winter. Not love. Yaren's voice sharpened. Don't act righteous. Your world isn't built on righteousness. Jaemin's fingers closed around the rosary in his pocket. It can be, he said. If I'm willing to burn down what isn't. He turned to the manager. Ms. Adeyemi returns to her job immediately. Any note in her file is removed, and anyone in this office who used immigration status as leverage will be reported to corporate counsel. The manager nodded so fast he looked dizzy. Jamin looked at the badge holder. There's no case. Leave. The man hesitated, then backed toward the door with stiff humiliation. Yaren's eyes filled with furious tears. You're humiliating me. You humiliated yourself, Jamin said, and the finality in his tone made Nia's skin prickle. Then Jamin looked at Nia again. The room fell away. His face softened by a fraction, just enough to reveal the man underneath the air. I tried to push you away, he said quietly. Because my father threatened you. Nia's breath caught. Your father? Jamin nodded once. He said he could complicate your paperwork. Make you disappear. Cold spread through Nia's chest. She'd feared that sentence her whole life. And you thought hurting me would protect me, she said, voice trembling. His eyes tightened with regret. Yes. I was wrong. Nia swallowed hard. You don't protect someone by making them feel worthless. Jamin flinched as if she'd struck him. I know, he said. I won't do it again. For a moment, Nia wanted to believe him completely. For another moment she wanted to run far away before believing could get her killed. Jamin turned back to Yaren. The wedding is cancelled. Yaren's face went pale. You can't. Our families. Your father. My father doesn't get to choose my heart, Jamin said. Not anymore. He looked at Nia. Tonight you're not going back to your apartment, he said, voice low. Not until I'm sure he can't reach you. Nia's pride rose immediately, sharp as a reflex. I can take care of myself. I know, he said. That's why you're still standing. But this is bigger than pride. This is strategy. Nia hated how reasonable he sounded, hated that she understood. Where? She asked. Mrs. Hargrove, Mateo said softly, stepping in. Sweet on 10. She trusts you. Nia blinked. The elderly guest, the one she'd helped near the tree, the one who had called her a good girl like it was a blessing. Nia nodded once. All right. That night, Mrs. Hargrove opened her suite door and pulled Nia into a hug so fierce it almost broke her. The older woman smelled like lavender and old books. They tried to break you, Mrs. Hargrove murmured. Nia's throat tightened. I'm not broken. Mrs. Hargrove cupped her cheek with trembling fingers. Good, she said. Because men like his father don't stop until someone makes them? Nia sat by the window later, tea warming her hands, staring at the city lights. She thought about the rosary, about Jae-min's apology, about the way Yaren's cruelty had been revealed with one video. She also thought about the chairman, about the fact that Jae-min had said the words out loud. My father threatened you. And she realized something that made her stomach twist. Jae-min hadn't saved her tonight. He had declared war. The next day arrived with snow and camera crews. The St. Celeste Regency transformed into a stage. The ballroom filled again. More guests, more glitter, more hunger for drama. Someone leaked the rumor that the wedding was delayed. Someone else whispered cancelled. Phones rose like weapons. Nia stood near the service entrance in a clean uniform, hands clasped tightly. She hadn't wanted to be there. But Mrs. Hargrove had held her hands and said, If you don't stand in your own truth, they'll write your story for you. Mateo stood near the audio booth, jaw set. The tablet was in his hand like a shield. Yaren stood near the altar in white satin and diamonds, face carefully composed. Her eyes, however, were frantic, like a person trying to hold a collapsing ceiling with bare hands. Chairman Kang Dae-hyun sat in the front row, still as a statue. His expression was calm, which made him more frightening than any shouting man. And Jae-min stood at the center of it all, rosary in hand. He scanned the room once, then found Nia. She was pale, but upright, terrified, but not begging. Jae-min stepped back from the altar. The officiant froze. The quartet stumbled in their carol. Whispers snapped into gasps. Yerin grabbed his sleeve, nails digging into fabric. Jae-min, she whispered through a smile that was cracking. Don't do this. Jae-min turned to her, his eyes steady. I already did, he said softly. He reached for the microphone. Stop, he said calmly. The room stilled, caught by the authority in his voice. This wedding will not happen, Jae-min said. A wave of shock rolled through the guests. Someone laughed, high, nervous. Someone else swore under their breath. The chairman's gaze sharpened like ice. Jae-min continued, voice even. Last night, an employee of this hotel was accused of theft, Nia Adeyemi. The spotlight of attention swung toward Nia so sharply she felt dizzy. She heard her own heartbeat in her ears. She did not steal, Jae-min said. She was framed. Yerin's composure cracked. This is insane. Jae-min didn't look at her. He nodded once to Mateo. Play the footage. The ballroom screens lit up. The video rolled. Yerin placing the bracelet in the linen bin, glancing around, walking away. Silence hit first, then the room erupted. Whispers turned into sharp voices. People leaned forward. Phones recorded greedily. Yerin staggered, shaking her head. It's edited. It's raw, Mateo said into his mic, voice firm, pulled directly from the server. Jae-min raised the rosary slightly, and the movement quieted the room again. Nia Adeyemi, return this to me, he said, holding it up. My mother's rosary. She returned it without reward. Without a request. Without knowing who I was. Nia's eyes burned. Tears threatened. She clenched her jaw, refusing to let the room see her break. Jae-min's voice lowered. I've lived surrounded by people who want my money, my name, my power. She wanted none of it. She chose integrity when it would have been easier to choose survival. The chairman's face remained cold, but something in his eyes flickered. Calculation, perhaps, or the realization that the cameras were now watching him too. Jae-min turned his gaze to Nia and spoke as if no one else existed. I was a coward, he said. I tried to push her away with cruelty because I was afraid of what my father could do. I won't live like that anymore. The room held its breath. Jae-min faced the guests again. If anyone threatens an employee's immigration status to protect a lie, he said calmly, they will answer to me, publicly. Then he stepped down from the altar and walked toward the velvet rope. Yerin's sob turned furious. You'll regret this. Jae-min didn't turn. He stopped in front of Nia. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tremor of adrenaline beneath his control. He looked like a man who had cut off his own chains and was waiting to see if the blood would stop. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Nia swallowed. Her voice was small. What happens now? Jae-min held her gaze. Now I accept the consequences, he said. And I ask you, without pressure, if you still want any part of me. Nia's breath shook. She was terrified. But she also remembered him asking permission, remembered him giving her space, remembered him owning his wrongdoing in front of a room that could destroy him. I don't want to be your rebellion, she whispered. You're not, he said. You're my truth. Nia closed her eyes for one heartbeat, then opened them. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Jae-min said. He held out his hand, not taking hers. Waiting. May I hold your hand? He asked. Consent. Again. Always. Nia nodded, tears finally slipping free. Jae-min took her hand carefully, as if her dignity mattered more than the cameras. The ballroom erupted again, but Jae-min didn't flinch. The chairman rose slowly, expression like winter. You've made your choice, Chairman Kang said, voice low enough to feel like a blade. Jae-min's gaze didn't waver. Yes. Then understand the consequences. I do, Jae-min said. He squeezed Nia's hand once. Come, he whispered. He led her out, past stunned guests and hungry cameras, into the quiet corridor where the air finally felt breathable. Nia leaned against the wall, shaking as the adrenaline drained. Jamin turned to her. "I have one more thing," he said. "What?" Nia whispered. "A promise isn't enough," he said. "I need a rule that binds me even when fear returns." Later that night, he brought her to the rooftop terrace. Snow drifted softly around the city lights. A small mistletoe decoration hung near the door, swaying in the wind. Jamin handed her a single sheet of paper. No legal language, no corporate seal. Just short handwritten lines. No control, no secrecy, no debt. Consent. Always. Truth. Even when it costs. If fear makes me cruel, I apologize and repair. If power threatens you, I stand in front first. Nia stared at the page until her vision blurred. "This is," she whispered, voice shaking. "This is not how your world works." "I'm done with how it works," Jamin said. "I want how it should." Nia's hands trembled. "And what do I owe you?" "Nothing," he said. "Only what you freely give." Nia pulled a cheap hotel pen from her pocket and wrote beneath his lines. "I keep my name. I keep my work. I choose you only if I can still choose myself." She handed it back. Jamin read it, and something in his face softened so completely she almost didn't recognize him. "Yes," he said simply. "Always." He placed the rosary into her palm and closed her fingers around it gently. Nia's eyes widened. "No, I can't." "My mother used this to keep me human," he said. "You reminded me how. Hold it when you doubt me." Nia swallowed hard. "What if I doubt you often?" Jamin's mouth curved into a small, real smile. "Then I'll spend a lifetime proving you don't have to." They stood beneath the mistletoe, breath visible, snow settling on Nia's hair like quiet blessings. Jamin didn't move closer. He asked, voice rough with emotion, "May I kiss you?" Nia nodded. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. His hand cupped her cheek warm against the cold, gentle, careful. Their lips met softly, not hungry, not possessive, but full of relief, like two people stepping out of fear into light. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together for a moment. Nia whispered, "I still have to work tomorrow." "Yes," Jamin said. "You do. And your father?" Jamin's gaze hardened slightly. "He will fight," he admitted. "But so will I." Nia breathed in, then out. "If it becomes too dangerous." "We don't run by hurting each other," Jamin said quietly. "We face it together, with truth." Nia's eyes filled again. She nodded once. "Together," she whispered. Below them, the city kept celebrating Christmas. Lights, music, laughter. Above it, on the rooftop, a billionaire heir held an immigrant cleaner's hand as if it were the only thing that mattered. And for the first time, Nia believed the softness she had felt in his penthouse bed wasn't a mistake. It was a beginning.